You know how there's a saying, when people don't like you, they'll find a reason to hate you? See, I get reminded of that saying every time I stumble upon a Michele Reis article, because I saw this one the other day, and the headline was basically, Michele Reis, 55, criticized for wrinkly hands. You ever just see something and go, bitch, really? Because that's how you know the public has been waiting in the bushes just for an angle. Let's see. Face card, still active. Body, still insane. Okay, marriage. Oh, still together. Okay, hands. Aha! The good old evidence of mortality. Caught her lacking on that one. But to the netizens' defense, before she married Julian Hui, this gentleman that you see in this picture on her right-hand side, ooh, if only you knew just how much the name Michele Reis once terrified every billionaire wife in this sleepless city. How much she had to do, how many rich men's hearts she broke, and what some of those poor billionaire wives had to go through just because they were way up. Just so she can get to this picture with Julian, and they get to wear matching designer sweaters now on her Instagram. Anyways, I think I've said enough, so who's up for some history? Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We've all heard the term pretty privileges. It's one of those things that works very well if you know how to use those privileges, and nobody understood that assignment better than Michele Reis. See, this is a picture of Michele, and some would say this picture represents a major turning point for her life. It was taken in 1988, where she won Miss Hong Kong at the age of 18, after her school friends told her that she should enter. Oh, see, that's a conversation I never heard in high school. Hey, we all think you're so hot, maybe you should join a beauty contest. And they were right, crazy, she killed it. She took home Miss Hong Kong, and after that, she took home Miss Chinese International. She was clear in all the brackets. But the thing about Michele is she didn't really need her friends nor a crown to know she was beautiful. In fact, she's been on a run aesthetically speaking since she was 3 years old. The story goes like this. Originally born and raised in Macau, she was of Portuguese and Shanghainese descent. And as one time when she was out with her family, Michele was spotted by a model scout who was captivated by her features that stood out immediately in the crowd, I'm assuming. So the model scouts approached her to recruit her for a baby product advertisement, and of course her mom agreed to the job. So at the young age of 3, Michele's aesthetics have already entered into the industry before she even really knew what an industry was. And I think that probably made it a lot easier for her to then slide into the modeling work she did in the side as a teenager, and of course eventually becoming Miss Hong Kong. But at that point in time, Michele didn't want to be a model. Michele's original dream wasn't even to be an actress, despite the numerous talent scouts that she would encounter on her walk back from school. It's just outside. Excuse me, ever consider joining the entertainment industry? No, I just want to get past you. Her dream, matter of fact, was actually to be a flight attendant. You see, she thought nice clean uniform, you travel the world, meet new people, go on an adventure. It's not that bad of a life at all. But I think the turning point for her was after her father Francis divorced her mother when she was only around 16 years old. You see, because her parents' marriage has been bad for years with a lot of constant fighting. And you know how when adults can't work things out, the first victims are typically the children? Well, it's the same thing with her parents. Her dad then had to move out, stopped visiting, eventually leading to the father-daughter relationship breaking down entirely. And you can see exactly how much she cared about him, because even years later in the press interviews, when she was asked about that time period, she would often defend her father in a way that it softens the framing and make it seem like he didn't really abandon the family, right? As per Michele. So with the father becoming absent during what I would say was a pretty crucial part of her life, Michele's mother then had to come in and step into both roles, and she was the one who taught her not only to be self-sufficient, because let me put it this way, Michele's childhood home was one of those houses where at least the lights were still on. That's a polite way to put it. So not only did Michele have to deal with that at an age where life should be relatively carefree, but also the mentality that she has to make the most out of her life. She has to abandon the flight attendant dream. So right before she became Miss Hong Kong, Michele had already moved into the modeling industry and began to take more and more modeling contracts. For one, it was to support her single mother, but on the other hand, it was to make money, because making money gave her safety and it gave her fulfillment. And this one time, whilst filming a brand commercial on the set of an advertisement, that's where she met Joe Nee, who was the ad's commercial writer. And upon sight, Joe took a liking to her immediately. In fact, Joe was so head over heels for Michele, he wrote her 1 love letter a day, totaling to over 100 love letters throughout the period he was pursuing her. And Michele also reflected that when it comes to love, if she feels an overwhelming amount of it, well then she does find it hard to resist. So Michele folded under Joe's pursuit very quickly, and the two began dating. So either Joe's love letter cut deep in that girl's heart, or Michelle just had to put him out of his misery. Hey, can you stop writing love letters, Joe? My mom found one the other day. It was embarrassing. See, if you ever find yourself stuck in a situation where you be writing 100 love letters, you could also seek advice from a second opinion. Maybe it's attachment issues. Today's sponsor, BetterHelp, might be able to help, because I think it's important to realize the obsession with image, for example, can be genuinely devastating to your mental health if you leave it unchecked, especially if you're the type of person who beat yourself up for not being good enough. So I really believe a second opinion could help drastically unload some mental burdens under that context, because if you are the type of person to set yourself a high bar, sometimes you really do need someone to tell you to slow down and just enjoy life. BetterHelp's mission is really just to make that all easy for you to start. You take a quick quiz, you get matched with the right credential therapist quickly, and then they'll have 3 methods of communication so you can choose which one allows you to comfortably unload your burdens. You can do it by phone, you can do it by video, or just through good old-fashioned texting. But the most important thing is that if you ever feel like your therapist wasn't the right fit, you can switch anytime at no extra cost. Over 6 million people have gotten help through BetterHelp with a 4.8 out of 5 rating on the App Store. So if that sounds like something you want to be involved in, head to my link in the description to get 10% off your first month with our paid partner, BetterHelp. Now see, Joe, he came from a very unique background, something that cannot be replicated with money. Because Joe's father was actually one of Hong Kong's legendary writers, right? One of 4, which meant Joe himself, well, he wasn't exactly an old money heir, he was more like a literary circle nepo baby. And although Joe didn't come from money, Michelle in a way still looked up to Joe. And their relationship was described to be sweet and innocent, right? So the media called it a puppy love type of relationship.
Puppy love.
You know, because it's Miss Model and her sweet literary boyfriend that writes love letters. It's kind of sweet if you think about it. So under that context, you know the rest of the story. It didn't take much for her friends to convince her, and she joined the beauty pageant, and she came out on top. But unfortunately for Joe, that outcome was the beginning of an end to their relationship. Now, to put it into perspective on how much of an opportunity that beauty pageant win ended up becoming, that victory brought Michelle not just fame, because the typically harsh and critical Hong Kong media actually switched up at the time and hailed Michelle as the most beautiful Miss Hong Kong in history. So are you kidding me? With a label like that, the entertainment industry didn't exactly need more evidence to see what kind of a major league hit she'd be if you just point her in the right direction. So they started throwing big contracts in her way, far more than what she was getting with Joe. So before she even knew what was really going on, Michelle was already picked up by household names in Hong Kong cinema, working alongside legendary figures like Jet Li and Andy Lau. And if you just take a look at the work she did in those movies, her aesthetic, her fashion, her persona was all truly ahead of its time. And that's what really worked in her favor, because directors obsessed over the fact that you can just throw her into a female lead and she'll absolutely devour. And as far as Hong Kong cinema saw it, Michele motherfucking Reis became the industry baby. But the problem for Joe is after Michelle won Miss Hong Kong, her life changed way too fast. In an interview reflecting on that period, Michelle herself puts it this way: "When Joe first knew me, I was just a student. The changes in me after entering the industry then put him under great pressure, so we naturally drifted apart. I felt like I could no longer take care of his feelings anymore, and this transition period needed time to adjust, and he found it hard to accept." So it was around this same time period Michelle and Joe then broke up. But here's the part of the story that gets pretty interesting, because if we then take a look at the reputation these two later garnished, well, see, Joe on one hand became a playboy, a romantic scandal magnet, and a chronic cheater. What happened to the guy I know who wrote 100 love letters? Hey, I know we've all heard the saying, behind every playboy is a girl who broke his heart, but the extent to the length he went was truly frightening compared to the person he was all before it. And Michelle herself, well, had quite the drastic changes too, later earning the reputation as Hong Kong's most ruthless billionaire hunter. So big changes, but as I was saying, the thing is, neither of those people had that reputation in the beginning, right? You know our girl Michelle. So is it fair to say that money and fame really changed her? Well, I want to make a case and say that it did. And it all started this one night, just days after her breakup with Joe, where Michelle received a 30 million Hong Kong dollar offer to spend 3 hours with property super tycoon Li Ka-shing. In fact, in 1988, there was even a rumor that goes around that real estate tycoon Li Ka-shing really took a liking to Michele Reis during her time at the beauty pageant. And it didn't come out of nowhere because Li Ka-shing was actually one of the investors in the Miss Hong Kong pageant that she won. Tabloid media even went as far to say, well, the only reason the title was given to Michelle exclusively was because Li Ka-shing liked Michelle so much. And this supposed rumor then only grew louder, obviously, when bro decided to one day wake up and drop 30 M's. But to put that into perspectives, in today's money, Li Ka-shing would have paid 11.5 million US dollars just for 3 hours, no strings attached. So allegedly, Michelle saw the money and along she went. Although that story then took a much darker turn when the alleged one-night stand tragically ended in Li Ka-shing's wife passing away the same night Michelle was paid the money. From a sudden heart attack, that is. Some reports say, at the time, claimed it involved sleeping pills, but of course no credible outlet ever dared to draw a concrete conclusion about whether her death had anything to do with the alleged affair, considering how powerful Li Ka-shing was. But the timing, I must say, was really quite the coincidence to the public. So as a result, the Li Ka-shing and Michelle rumors never really developed into proper dating narratives, and even decades later, all we ever know about that period of time was the alleged one-night incident and the tragedy that occurred after. But interestingly, shortly after Joe and Michelle's breakup and the 30 million Hong Kong dollar incident, Joe's aunt also started publicly criticizing Michelle, saying that as beautiful as she is, she's a beauty with no soul. Well, either somebody's jealous, or, one could guess she wasn't probably too pleased about her leaving Joe. And she even wrote a romantic novel based on Joe and Michelle's romance. Here it is if you're interested. And if you're curious, in that book, Michelle was not at all a lovable character. So note to self, if you're going to date a nepo baby from the literary circle, then you better pray they don't write you in a novel as a romance villain. But however you want to read that era of Michelle's actions, one thing is clear. Michelle has moved on to bigger and better. And more importantly, the people now know Michelle can, matter of fact, be bought. And once Michelle got deeper and deeper into that spiral, a very specific door started to crack open for her. That, my friend, is the billionaire class. See, Hong Kong at the time had no shortages of rich men, and there certainly was no shortages of billionaires openly collecting dating scandals either. But if you had to pick one to zero into, right, to be the king of them all, then nobody can overlook the Hong Kong actress sniper, Joseph Lau. That was of course the name given to him when you look at his roster. God damn, not a tier below A-lister in sight. Okay, so not to gargle on good old Joseph's balls, but this is crucial information in case you ask how he was able to handle all this generational. Well, let me put it this way. Joe, well, we can all agree, given his connections, he's probably the type of guy that can get you in the room. But then compared to Joseph, the property tycoon, well, that's the type of guy who'd quite literally just buy the whole fucking building. And evidently, that's what he did with Michelle. See, there was this one time he was buying Michelle all these clothes and designer bags, and Michelle, suffering from success, had to start rejecting his gifts because, well, I mean, where is it gonna go? My closet's full. I heard she was starting to carry groceries with her Hermes bags. But to a man like Joseph, well, quite the trivial challenge, you see. Got the idea. Bought her a $20 million mansion. Well, don't worry, darling, now you can fit the clothes. So much like Li Ka-shing, Joseph was first generation rich. But the problem Michelle had with Joseph was the fact that he was a sucker for a pretty face. His alleged roster would go on to then include Rosamund Kwan, Ada Choi, Fanny Yuan, Catherine Yan, and finally Michele Reis. And the best part of it all is that they all coexisted with his wife, Bo Wing Kam, with her permission to do so as well. See, these billionaires be wildin'. See, his wife, Bo Wing Kam, often had to deal with these younger female companions, but none of them had any problems with each other thanks to the way she was dealing with it. I'll give you one example. She was apparently hiring tutors for Ada Choi at the time to give her English and etiquette lessons because Joseph Lau was starting to take her on business outings frequently enough for them to see the need to develop her social skills. See, I don't know if you heard what I just said, but I think billionaire wives are built different. And you know what? Even then, even to a woman like Bo Wing Kam, even when she's willing to go to that extent for her husband's situationships, she could not stand Michele Reis. Reason number one, because from the beginning, Michelle really liked Joseph, and we can tell because this later interview she recounts when she was asked about, what she saw exactly in Mr. Joseph Lau. She openly admitted that she just liked the way he's so domineering. I mean, that's true. I would say that too if Joseph Lau casually dropped 20 million HKD on me, and I consider myself straight. So you can only imagine what other gifts he was showering her with. Cars, jewelries, designer goods. Well, she really did have it all from Joseph Lau. But on the other hand, whilst Michelle really did like Joseph, the part that sucks for Bo Wing Kam, the original wife, was that the feeling was mutual. Because there was this one time that Joseph went to deliver snacks to Michelle. He arrives under her apartment and found out the elevator was broken. Well, good old Joseph climbed 20 flights of stairs just to personally deliver those snacks. Had a 60-year-old billionaire sweating like a steamed dumpling, all for Michelle. And plus, this relationship was matter of fact the only mistress allegations Joseph Lau didn't even bother denying, openly admitted to it. So Bo Wing Kam likely saw Michelle as the only real threat to her position. Oh, but reason number 2 on why I say Mrs. Bo Wing Kam could not stand Michelle is because Michelle was batshit crazy, and Michelle played that like a trump card. So unlike the other mistresses in his roster, Michelle publicly challenged Bo Wing Kam. Not only did she refuse to acknowledge Mrs. Bo's position as the head wife and the original, but she openly taunted her as well, because Michelle would call her in the middle of the night, when she knows Joseph wasn't with her and she herself, would be alone too, but Michelle would pretend that she was hanging out with Joseph, just to let her know, hey, I'm hanging out with your man again. And then when she knew Bo Wing Kam was with Joseph, well, she'd still call, and she would outright insult her on the phone, and Joseph just listening in the background. And when Michelle was actually with Joseph, well, she'd call again while they were doing their thing, and she'd sound real provocative in those calls. And then after Joseph left, she'd call Bo Wing Kam again to describe to her in detail what they were doing, and this went on for a very long time. Yikes. Hey, is this hell? Yeah, table for 2, spineless billionaire and his demon, please. But this was all mind games for Michelle, you see. Michelle didn't exactly stop at just his official wife. Even Joseph's newer favorites were reportedly greeted by her one by one. Anybody who allegedly had anything to do with threatening Michelle's position got a taste of her temper. And she then built up a notorious reputation because of it for being difficult to mess with. All whilst good old Joseph knew what she was doing all along to his poor wife, and he just let her did whatever she wanted. Okay, so a couple years later, there was even a leaked phone conversation that was between Michelle and Joseph. And if we take a look, then you can see exactly how much Joseph was just bending over backwards for her. Okay, so before I read the first sentence, I'll give you guys some spicy context so it makes sense. You see how Michelle goes over here? It's like how Wang Jing is obsessed with Qing Yao doing absolutely anything for her. Now this part's funny because Wang Jing is like another famous tycoon, and in the media at the time, he was bending over backwards for his mistress, Qing Yao. So Michelle's like drawing an analogy, basically saying, Joseph, you're just like the other guy, doing that kind of thing for his mistresses. That's just an insult to your intelligence. It is so stupid. So you can go ahead and promote other people and sleep with other women, like Wang Jing. So Michelle's obviously getting jealous at Joseph's other activities. And that's where Joseph retorts. Oh, you think the person I'm doing this to is my girlfriend? No, she's my wife. I'm just an employee. Oh, an employee? You need to treat an employee that well? Joseph gets confused. Who am I good to now? So Michelle goes, who are you good to? Aren't you good to Ada Choi? I'm good to Ada? Yeah, the whole world knows you opened a company for her and made drama for her to film. That much contact? Joseph defends himself. Yeah, that was in the past, okay? I can't be bothered arguing with you. Oh, look at Joseph stand up for himself with a classic rage bait. Michelle's evidently pissed off at that response though. Oh, well, I gotta congratulate you signing that stupid cunt Hongxing. Go back to her then. Hurry up and make her famous. I never wanted to make her famous. You didn't want to make her famous, yet you signed her. Hey, just so you guys know, this insult can't be gender neutral. Well, making her famous is nothing, and then sign. And unfortunately, that's all we get out of the 48 seconds of leaked audio. Well, it wasn't a long conversation, but I think it gives us just the idea. So it is under exactly this kind of relentless barrage of jealousy directed towards Bo Wing Kam, she finally had enough of the verbal abuse from Michelle and eventually divorced Joseph in 1992, effectively ending their 15-year marriage. See, Bo Wing Kam though even went as far to write a book called Qing Xinji, and this book then had a segment that talks about how all these stars were interfering with their marriage during this period. But even then, retrospectively, she went on to say, well, Well, Ada Choi was cute, Rosamund Kwan was very elegant, had absolutely no issues with any of the alleged mistresses, but then when it came to Michelle, Bo Wing Kam said Michelle weaponized her pretty privileges to cause this divorce. And I think that's perfectly valid to say, because would Joseph have been this patient with anybody else if it wasn't because Joseph probably saw her as the #1 trophy wife, because she was hailed as the pinnacle of beauty in her generation at the time. But that being said, although Michelle did get what she wanted, Joseph actually never ended up marrying her, and matter of fact did the opposite and literally strung her along for the next 8 years, where she never did get the title as a wife, leading to a disappointing breakup eventually in 1999, resulting in a total of 11 years of nothing more than just a situationship. You know what that's called? Michelle was using a bamboo basket to draw water. In the end, you get nothing. The Chinese proverbs are cooking for situations like this. So after the breakup with Joseph Lau, some say 11 years of youth down the drain, Michelle did move on to a few other romance allegations, one of which included an actor she played Fallen Angels with, Leon Lai. But Leon, however, was more like a pretty face, and neither side gave the public a clean confirmation. Tabloid media actually went to phrase it as Leon broke things off with Michelle because of, well, you can probably guess why. And when Michelle was asked about it, her answer was basically, well, even if I say nothing happened, the whole world already thinks it did, so just treat it as a yes. Which sounds awfully like back in high school. Like your friends ask you, are you and your crush dating? And you're just like, well, he technically didn't say no, so yes, we're dating. But you know what, just treat that as mindless gossip. But by this point, at 36 years old, Michelle was no longer the rising star she had been in her early 20s. See, her acting output declined significantly after the late 1990s. She appeared in less and less films after Fallen Angels and The Flower of Shanghai, which is arguably some of her strongest work. And for the ones that she did appear in later on, well, none quite matched the same cultural impact or the critical attention she had during the height of her career. And if you're wondering why that be the case, well, it's because by the mid-2000s, all the public discussion around Michelle was often just heavily focused on her relationship and social life instead of her actual career, which means it's not too much wiggle room to transition into powerful female lead personas that were beginning to pop off, which I'd say is a train that you wouldn't want to miss. But then again, it's also wrong to say 11 years with Joseph was all for nothing, because remember, she did have that 20 million Hong Kong dollar property Joseph dropped on her. And matter of fact, when they broke up, she managed to even sell it for around 68 million Hong Kong dollars. In US dollars, that's around 8.7 million, which is not too bad at all. But then if we compare her to some of the other actresses in her bracket, like Bridget Lin, Maggie Cheung, or even Karina Lau, who all went on to either become international award-winning actresses and proper icons, then Michelle, well, she does look pale in comparison. And when we compare the wealth side of things, I'm willing to bet you my life that Michelle is the poorest of them all. Objection. So what about her husband? Julian at the beginning, isn't he a tycoon too? Well, it's good that I mentioned it because that's exactly where she messed up the biggest. Now you see, Julian came from a very different type of background to both Joe and Joseph. Julian's great-grandfather comes from a long lineage of influential business figures, and by the time he got to his grandfather, Mr. Hui Oi Chow, he was hailed as the king of shipping for the dynasty he built for the Hui family in the industry. And of course, Julian's father then went on to extend that empire. So in other words, on paper, she is loaded, because Julian wasn't some entertainment heir or a first-generation rich. No, Julian's old money. But the thing about Julian was that, unlike his father and his grandfather, whilst they spent their lives chasing business opportunities and building a life for their family, Julian, on the other hand, seemed far more interested in chasing actresses instead, which has definitely earned him quite the playboy reputation. Which is exactly why the family wasn't exactly fond of Julian. Julian's first relationship, you see, was with an actress, Karina Lau. And honestly, it was quite the typical story. It was even kind of romantic. One time, Karina was driving. Her car had a flat tire randomly on the road. Karina starts panicking and she calls her friend, Sandra, to come and help. Sandra hears that, was like, I don't know how to change a tire, but I do know a guy. Sends Julian the coordinates. So Julian then comes over, right? Obviously changed the tires for Karina, and she was like, oh my god. Julian then saw the opportunity to hit third base and asked her out on a date, and the two then quickly began a proper relationship, and even got to the point where they were genuinely discussing marriage. But the Hui family, however, wasn't too keen on that couple, because Karina, well, she was merely just an actress. So their relationship faced a lot of internal pressures, which eventually led to their breakup in 1988. So Julian then moved on to Pansy Ho, heiress to the Ho casino empire. If you don't know what that is, basically that's the family that built Macau on top of a casino. It's a topic for another day. But what's different about Pansy compared to him and Karina is that Julian's marriage to Pansy was more like a business alliance between the shipping king and the casino king's family. And you know the things that could go wrong with arranged marriages, like your family might be happy with it, but at the end of the day, right, marriage is still a two-person thing that requires mutual affection. So what ended up happening was within just a couple years into Julian and Pansy's marriage, the two actually went de facto, and Julian then continued to mess around with small-time models to fill the void. Because somewhere deep down in Julian, he could never forget those tire-changing days where he was parading around with an exciting actress. So it is exactly at that moment where he was in the trenches. Well, that's where he met Michele. Oh, so now it looks like actresses are back on the menu for Julian. So at this time of the story, Julian was reportedly linked to a long-term girlfriend of around 3 years, and her name was Xu Qiwen. Now, Miss Xu and Michele were actually friends from the same jet ski circle, and there's one time Miss Xu decided it'd be a good idea to invite her boyfriend Julian so he could host the jet ski parties because he has a big yacht. Now, the first couple of times Julian came, everybody went out to sea together in his yacht and everyone was having fun in the jet skis. But you know Michele. The two added each other on social media, and after exchanging text messages day and night, the two started getting closer and closer until they started dating. And all of a sudden, jet ski parties started to become an RSVP event for Xu Qiwen. So after the whole jet ski yacht party drama, the two then quickly started appearing together in business events, but there is still one problem. Forget about Pansy Ho. Separated or not, Pansy was still legally Mrs. Hui, which means unless Pansy gets a divorce, it'll be a Joseph Lau situation all over again. Years invested, nothing to show for it. Michele wasn't going to let history repeat itself, but then the thing is, going toe-to-toe with Pansy Ho the way she did with Bowie Cam would be suicide, considering the Ho family had spent decades accumulating triad affiliations. And whether or not it's true, right, their reputation, you don't want to test that theory by pushing their buttons a little too hard. So Michele had to play this one a little different. She made herself impossible to ignore. So using the paparazzi to her advantage, Michele began a streak of public displays of affection, and the gossip medias got to work immediately. Oriental New Weekly photographed Michele and Julian kissing on the streets in the middle of one of Hong Kong's busiest financial districts. You see, a regular actress would do anything to avoid a privacy invasion like this. But in Michele's eyes, go ahead and take the picture. Put bold captions, make it jarring for Pansy, because Michele knew nothing speeds up a divorce quite like a proud business heiress seeing her still legally wedded husband kissing another woman in broad daylight, on the internet as well, for all of Hong Kong to see. And soon enough, she was right again. Pansy Ho divorced Julian just a few months after the photo were dropped, effectively ending their 16 years of marriage. In fact, the commotion got so large at the time, even good old Joseph Lau came back from the dead. Married at this point, by the way. Remarried, sorry. Bought up every advertisement space in one of Hong Kong's biggest news outlets at the time, and he wrote, "Happy birthday, Michele, 20th of July, 2006. With love, the one," sign at the bottom, just to try to win her back. Hey, maybe Joseph saw the kissing photos and thought, hey, she's trying to get me. See, I don't know how you feel, but I feel like if I was his wife, I'd make sure he'd get another divorce. But you know how we know it's Joseph? Because the media at the time thought Julian did it. But Joseph came out and told the public, no, it was me. Julian, though, even tried to get back at Joseph and drove around Hong Kong with a personalized plate that read, "Me too," as in, like, me too, I love her too. Which, I gotta be honest, as a old money nepo baby, that's weak. You know what is the funniest thing though? When journalists eventually did ask Michele on what that was all about, she told the reporters that the one and only was talking about her dog, Milky, who had died during the same time. So the one means being irreplaceable because Milky was truly irreplaceable. Did not mention Joseph, did not even mention Julian. She named the dog. You know what? Say what you will about Michele, but she is one cold bitch. So by this point, Michele was so proud of that supposed win over Pansy, they even set the day of the wedding just 2 days before Stanley Ho's birthday celebration, who is Pansy's father. And the craziest part was Stanley Ho actually decided to celebrate 2 days early on November 23rd just to mess with Julian and Michele back. And when reporters ambushed him outside to ask about the wedding happening on the same day, of course, as the head of the Ho family, Stanley personally gave his blessings and told all of Hong Kong he never really liked Julian and never understood how to appreciate him from day one. Ouch, that is one disappointed father-in-law till the end. Except it wasn't really the end. Not for Pansy, you see, never was, because, allow me to make a point if you made it this far. I like to believe both Michele and Pansy were quite similar in a lot of aspects. See, everything Michele did, from the innocent Joe days to the Joseph years, right, the paparazzi campaigns and all the pressure on Pansy, was all engineered towards one destination if you really think about it, right? It was getting to a position of what she thought was security. And to her credit, she fought hard to get there. She was tactical through and through. And Pansy's upbringing was similar because growing up in a family with 16 siblings across 4 of her father's wives, surrounded by the competition that it brings, Pansy learned early as well that nobody was coming to secure her position, she had to build it herself. But the difference, I would say, is in the direction of the building. Michele was building towards something external. A title, a man, a family name that would finally make her feel safe. The security she was chasing always lived externally outside herself. But Pansy was building something that couldn't be taken away. An empire that exists independent of any man or marriage. The security she was building lived inside the work itself, so Julian was never the point. So by the time she had met Julian, Pansy was already beginning her way up to control the logistics side of the Ho empire. Literally, the ferries that you take from Hong Kong to Macau and the hotel you stay in, I think after you gamble in the casino, I think that's her part of the empire. And the way she thunk then carried over when she married into the Hui family because she is well connected with Julian's parents. See, there was this piece of news that went very viral when it came out. Before Pansy officially broke it off with Julian for good, both Hong Kong and Chinese media described Pansy as having told the Hui family parents directly, "Although I can no longer be your daughter-in-law, I can still be your daughter." And of course, whether or not you believe this piece of gossip is a different story, but what matters is she did keep things going. Kept hanging out with the in-laws, continued to meet regularly for meals and discuss business together with Mr. and Mrs. Hui, something not even Julian, their son, regularly did. So then in 2014, after Julian's elder brother and the actual heir to the empire, Jenkins Hui, tragically passed away at age 75. The family fortune of 42 billion Hong Kong dollars did not go to Julian, the sole surviving heir. No, it was matter of fact, locked up in a trust, paying a measly wage of 2 million Hong Kong dollars a month. Which, let's be fair, that's nothing compared to how much money's in that trust. But I think the part that really sits with me is the fact that until the day Julian and Michele passed away, not a single dollar of the trust's principal would ever be distributed to them. And when we put it into perspective, Michele on paper is now rich by all means necessary. With a net worth of 42 billion Hong Kong dollars, she is well above her actress friends. And I'd say on paper, she's even on equal terms with Joseph Lau. But then again, it's just like a beauty with no soul, that money also has no name. Michele did spend years trying to win the Hui family's approval and largely never got it because Julian's mother reportedly said while she was alive publicly that Pansy was the only daughter-in-law in her heart. But I think the real question a lot of people are still asking even today is whether Mr. Hui would have done the same thing if Michele just never entered the picture and Pansy was the one on the receiving end of that dynasty. But I guess we'll never know. But I think I will see you again soon. See you next time.